How do you make a SwiftUI app? In this video, I'll show you how to create a simple login screen with a model object using the new observation framework, all in Xcode 16. Stay tuned to master this powerful tool and improve your app development today. Hey, what's up? This is Paul Solt. Let's dive in to my sample project. So I have a app here that's set up that's going to do email validation. I've already got the UI designed. And the way this works is it will validate the email as you type it. So if I take away some of the email address right here, we'll see that that's going to hide and show the create account. It's going to disable the button. And the same is true if we go into the next thing. If I get rid of the password and I start typing something, it needs to have a certain number of characters in order for that button to activate. All right. So all of this sample code is available to download if you want it. Check out the link down below. You'll be taken to a website that looks like this. Just enter your email address and you'll be able to get the source code for this tutorial as well as my other SwiftUI tutorials. All right, let's dive right in. That code is going to be sort of formatted like this, so you'll be able to get everything that you need. There will sometimes be a demo app, and then there'll be an end state where you'll see the final result. All right, so we're going to create a brand new Xcode project. I'm just going to throw this off to the other screen, and we're going to go ahead and get started. Okay, so I have the end project right here. This is going to be the starting point, and we are going to design this UI, and we are going to get it hooked up. So let's do that. So the first thing that we're probably going to start with is going to be this email validation logic. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to first write it in here. I'm going to show you a new feature in Xcode 16. I'm using Vim Mode. So if you haven't used that yet, I am an editor under Vim Mode. That's how I am working. I have one video on that. I might make some more videos if you're interested. Just comment down below and I can put that together. All right, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to import observation. This is the new framework that Apple has, and this is iOS 17. And this is going to allow us to write our new model objects using the observable macro. So this is a macro that we apply to a class, and I'll call this the user validator. All right, in this class, we're going to have a name, and these are all going to be strings. So I'll just use the starting values here to define them. We're going to have an email, and we're going to have a password. Okay, with that, I then want to construct some simple validation logic. And so I'm going to have another variable that I can listen to in the UI for if a button is disabled or enabled. And so I'll just model that using a computed property. So this will be is submit button disabled. And this will be a Boolean computed property. And to just get started, let's do name is empty. So if it's empty, it's going to be disabled, or let's do password.count is greater than 8. Or sorry, let's do the case where it's not true. That's going to be less than 8. So if it's under 8 characters, it's going to be disabled. And then we'll do one other, but before we do that, let's write a method that's going to help us determine if it's a valid email. And for that, I'm not going to type it all out, but I thought this was really cool and I wanted to sort of show it off. I'm just going to copy this over just because it's a little bit tricky to get right. And I'll walk through what we're using right here. So let me just turn off this preview with the Command Enter keyboard shortcut. I have another video that if you want to learn keyboard shortcuts, that I can link down below. All right, so in here we have a regex, and this is actually using the new regex syntax that I had no idea was available. I think this came out in Swift 5.7. And so Paul Hudson has a article on this, and I can pull that up right here. It's regular expressions. There's a bunch of cool things in here, but the coolest thing is that you can write them sort of in line like you would sort of expect to write a regular expression. And so I copied a regular expression from this link, which is all about regular expressions. And there's a whole lot of depth that you can go into for email validation. You can get really gnarly on like how valid your syntax is. So this is just a very simple validation, and I'm actually doing it so that it's ignoring case, which is kind of cool. So we create that email regex, and then I just apply the modifier ignore case, and then we just look for any matches. And if it's not empty, then we know that it's a valid email. Now, this isn't going to be a perfect validation, but it's good enough for our demo, and it's going to get you started with something that's way less complicated than we need right now for a simple demo app. All right, so that is it for the observation logic that we need here. Something I was thinking of showing. If I go into macro, expand macro. All right, so under editor, there is this option to expand macro if you select something. And what this will do is this will expand that macro that we've set up. So it's going to track the name automatically. It's going to track the email, password. So if you want to opt out of any of this tracking, you have to do the observation ignored keyword, and that will prevent that from happening. And then this is additional auto-generated code down here. So that's a cool little thing that you can look at. Hide all macro expansions. Hopefully gets rid of, do I have to close these manually? Okay, I guess that feature is not working in Xcode 16, or I did it wrong. So that is the observable macro. That's our model object. So the nice thing is we don't need any published properties. So this would get rid of all of that. We don't need to say observable object, and we can just work with it. Now we are going to be using text fields here. So text fields you need to be binding, and that works great with a published property. To do that with the new observation framework, what you have to do is you have to use the bindable property modifier. Okay, so let's get into the SwiftUI customization of this, and let's go through and write out how we would do this. So I'm going to just delete this, and we'll start writing some of our code in here. The first thing that we're going to focus on is just getting the overall input hooked up. So we've got our model object, and I'm just going to create a bindable. Since I know that I want to bind to these text fields, I'm going to create a bindable var. This is going to be our user validator and user validator. All right, so then in here, we're going to have to pass that in as a property. And I'm going to use a new thing. I believe this is Xcode 16. It's the previewable. So previewable down here, and then at state, and then I can create a user validator, and this equals user validator. So this will hook up our object, and then I can pass that into our content view, but I don't want to call it content view. We'll rename that in a second. So this can be our user validator, and we'll pass in user validator. So that's hooked up here, but there's one other spot that we're going to need to do this, and that's going to be in this content view. And I'm just going to insert here. Whoops. We'll just replace this. And then we're going to need our own model object here. So that's going to be just a state var user validator, just like we had written it in the preview. All right, so that's hooked up. We can go ahead and run it, and we should see it appear eventually. There's not, oh, there's nothing on the screen. So let's go ahead and put a text field. And for this, we're going to do a binding. So we're going to do probably one of these. And I'm going to bind to that user validator dot name. And then I'm just going to get rid of this. And we're going to put text here. And that's just going to say name. And we'll see if this gets us our preview. I'll do the Option Command P to get that preview to load. And then if we were to run this, we should see that name appears. All right, with that, we have a text field. If we click it and I do Command K on the simulator, we should see the keyboard appear. And now if I start writing, you'll see that I can write my name, but it's not doing capital case. And so this is where, when you're working on an app, and a lot of apps don't pay attention to the details, you want to make sure that you make this easy for your users. And users are going to have names that are different spellings and things that are not really standard. So right now it's telling me my name is incorrect. If I click on it, it wants to recommend I update it to sold, silt, or do it. Dolt. None of that is pleasing to the user. And so what we use here is we want to disable autocorrection. So we can just do autocorrection is disabled. And then the other thing that we can do is we can do auto capitalization of text input. So text input, auto capitalization. And here we can give it a few different methods. We can do all characters, never, sentences, or words. For names, we generally capitalize the word. So we'll go ahead and do that. And if we run this one more time, we should be able to start writing my name. So Paul Solt, and you see that starts every word capital. Okay, great. That's excellent. All right. So pressing enter and we can sort of move on. All right. So that's our first text field. Let's go ahead. One thing I didn't like here is content view. We could rename this to something else. So let's call this the login view or the account creation view. I'm just going to click on refactor. Only do this when your app is building, and we'll hit rename. And then I will type in, let's call it login view. I can see where it's going to replace. And as I type live, it's going to update live. I do want it to hit here. So I'm going to hit the plus button on that. And that will be allowing us to rename. So now we should still be able to run if you rename. And I'm just going to do a commit here real quick. Actually, I don't think that got everything. Okay, so we have sort of a starting point. We've got the email validation. We've got a single text field working. Let's go ahead and continue working on these different text fields. I'm going to come down here and I'm going to create a new text field. So we've got to get our email and our password. So we're going to use TextField and SecureField. So TextField, and then we're going to do text and then pass in our user validator. We're using that $ symbol to bind the attribute so that it's a bidirectional. As it changes somewhere else, it will update. And then if we change it within this control, it will update. So here we'll give it the email, and then I'll do the same thing for the auto correction disabled. And let's actually give it the text here so that we can see a placeholder, and I'll re-indent that. And then the other thing I want to do, and this is another thing a lot of apps fail to do, is customize the keyboard type. So we're going to customize the keyboard so that it makes more sense for the action that we're doing here. And so this is going to be one of these options. We've got email address, number pad, decimal pad, URL, numbers of punctuation, ASCII capable. So there's a bunch. How many more do we got? So that's a fun amount of different ones. For this, we're going to go with the email address. So we'll customize that. Go ahead and fix my compiler error here. Rerun it. We should see name and email placeholder. So I can type my name, press enter or tab, and then I can go to the email and I can write Paul at supereasyapps.com. There's no validation happening right now, but tabbing between them lets me sort of switch between the two using my keyboard, which would be possible doing something like that on the iPad keyboard. After that, let's go ahead and do a secure text field for that password. So I'm going to go ahead and create a secure field. Same type of setup. We pass in the text that we want to bind it to. And in this case, it's going to be user validator dot password. And then I'll have that placeholder text, and that's going to just be password. And with that, I don't think we need to disable the autocorrect for a secure field. I think it's going to be by default. I don't know if there's anything else I want to do to it. So let's preview that. I'll just do Command Option P to reload that, and you can see that we've got our preview here. Now I can't pull up the keyboard in preview, so we're not going to see that here, but if we rerun it, we should see that we have these 3 text fields. After that, we need to get a button. So let's go ahead and do a button. And I'm going to do the action label button. So we're going to have an action here and then the label. And the label will just be create account. And then let's print out all of the information. So here I'm going to print out name, email, password. So let's go ahead and run it. And doing that, I can go ahead and hit create accounts, and we'll see that that prints out. Now at this point, we're not doing any of that validation of being able to submit this button. So if we want to enable that, all we need to do is grab our disabled state on this, and we can say that this button is disabled whenever user validator dot is submit button disabled is true. And in this case, if we rerun it one more time, we should see that it's now starting off disabled, and I can type once I do a 8-letter password, it now enables. And if I go back up to the the email, oh, we're not actually validating the email. So we added that method, but I forgot to hook that up. So let's hook that up, and we'll say if not is valid email, and we'll pass in the email, and let's go ahead and run that. All right, so that works. And let's just check that the email validation works. So if I mess this up, take away that .com, or if I take away like the @ symbol, you'll see that this is doing the validation logic. All right, so we've got the MVP of this doing everything, but it kind of looks like it could use some styling. And so that's what we're going to focus on next, is how do we make this look a little bit more interesting? In the beginning, I showed you UI that looks like this. So how do we create something that looks like that? I'm going to do a quick commit, stage everything. All right. Before I do that, let me show you one feature in Xcode 16 that allows you to create new files really quickly. I can just cut this, delete all these extra lines, click over in my navigator, Command V to paste, and it creates a brand new file with my user validator class. The only thing that's missing is that import statement. So let me just make sure I cut that. bring that back over here, paste it in. And now we should be able to still run that. I think I cut too much. Yes. All right, and so that's a quick way to add a new file in Xcode 16. I don't know why we got so tiny. Oh, I hit the wrong button. Okay. All right, so we've refactored a little bit, moving a file around that does our email validation. We've got our login view here, and now we want to customize this. So how can we customize this? Well, a lot of times your designers will give you some designs for how these UIs should work. We could use the default, and we can apply a default sort of customization to these different text fields by using the group property. So I can apply the same type of TextField style. And here we have 3 different options. I could do plain, automatic, or rounded border. If we do rounded border, we'll see that we get sort of this standard iOS look, but that might not be enough to match the design that you want. So if you wanted to customize that more, I don't think there's a official way to make your own custom styles. And so what we would have to do here is customize it a little bit more. And to do that, I'm going to add some padding, and then I'm going to add the background. So this is going to be dark mode supportive. And then I'm going to add a clip shape. And that's going to be a rectangle with a rounded corner. And we're going to look for the corner radius, which is this one down here. This takes a CG float. And we can pass it something like 4 to give us a sort of stylized look. And that will give us the shape. Now, the challenge here is I want to then add a background color using the secondary system background down below. So let's go ahead and update the styling for this UI so that you can actually see this. I'll add some padding and push this in. I'll add that background color, and we're going to add in, it's going to be a color of a UI color. So we're going to do UI color dot, and then there is a system background color, but we want the secondary background color. So we'll go ahead and do that. And that's going to give us a little bit of a style here. And then what I'll do is I'll add a corner radius to that of 4. Actually, yeah, 4 is going to be a light corner radius. Maybe we want to go 8. And then I'll give it a little bit more padding on the edges of 20. All right, so that's going to push us inside a little bit. You'll be able to see that. I don't know if that corner radius is sort of competing with those inners, so I'm just going to bump it back to 4 just to keep it looking a little bit more consistent. Yeah, so that's looking kind of cool. So now we have some group styling. We still want to have some text. So if we jump back to this app, we can see there's a create account. I've got a little bit of extra spacing. So let's go ahead and do that. To get the create account, I really need to have an inner stack view, and I need to control the spacing a little bit more. So let's create a new VStack here with some spacing. This will be 16 around this group element, and we'll just open that up right there. That's going to give us a little bit more breathing room between these elements. And then at the very top, we're going to do create account. And we'll do, again, another spacing of 16. So I need to have this outer element. I want to be able to sort of control it. I may or may not want this to be the same spacing, which is why I have a second VStack. So here I'll do create account, and we'll make this bold. And we'll add a little bit of padding so that that pushes down a bit. So I'll add 16 to just the bottom. So we'll do bottom padding of 16. And that's all we're going to need here. All right, so that's looking pretty good. Last thing that I want to focus on is the sort of button style. So we can see that the button style here is got that highlight. And if we want to create that same effect down at the very bottom, I'm just going to append here. We're going to go ahead and do the button style. And with that, there are a few different options that we could look at. So if you do the dot syntax, actually none of these are working in terms of auto completion, but there's one called bordered prominent. And we can go ahead and use that one. There's also bordered. And we can go ahead and check this out. So let's go ahead and run it and see how it's looking. I see we need a little bit more padding. So let's add a little bit of padding to this bottom button. So right here, we're just going to add padding to the top of just 16 to give us a little bit more breathing room. I'll update the preview and we should see that this shifts down a little bit. So that's looking pretty good. We can also test to make sure that this works in dark mode. So if we do that, we see this. The test text should all be light. And then if we have a valid email address, we see that that's working as well. And if you want, you could make this bold, just sort of see how that looks. And I think there's one more thing I want to show you, and that is when we actually use this, if you want this to work well with the keyboard or sort of the next button or even the default button working, there is a keyboard shortcut for the default action. And so this is super useful both for alerts as well as buttons in this UI. So if we want to make this kind of like a form, we can go down to our button and add one more option here, and that is going to be the keyboard shortcut. So if we do a keyboard shortcut of default, and here we can see the autocomplete is working, we've got default, escape, cancel action. So usually, like if you're doing an alert, you're going to want to use default and cancel on your buttons, and that's going to allow you to move through the UI easier across the different platforms. So I'm going to do the default action. We're going to run this one more time, and you're going to see that I should be able to click in here, type my name, type my email address, type a password that is 8 characters long, and we see that that works. And if I press enter now, the default action should print out our debug statement. So if I press enter, for some reason it worked the second time. And if I press it now, it's hooked up. I don't know if we had a lot of output that was hiding that. I don't see it. So for some reason it didn't work the first time, but it worked the second time. It might be because it was dismissing the actual text field. And we might actually need to hook that up via another action on this secure field. But that's all I have to show. If you want to play around with this more, I'll have the code that you can download this exact copy of my code. I'll do a commit just so that it's clean so that you can sort of see what's changed, what's not changed. All right, so thanks for watching. I really appreciate you sticking with me through this tutorial. If you liked this video, click the like button and hit the subscribe button if you want to get more Swift and iOS related content. I'm talking about sort of my job search as well as making apps and working on these different features as iOS development has changed a lot over the years. So my next video is going to be on how to search for iOS jobs in 2024 using LinkedIn. If you are searching for a job, or even if you're not searching for a job, it's a really good skill to practice interviewing. It's a really good skill to practice your code challenges. So I'm going to show you an effective technique that I have found for finding jobs on LinkedIn. And I'm really only applying to about 3 jobs a week at this point, and I'm getting inbound leads, and I'm having interviews, and I'm having chats with hiring managers. So like that's a positive. So far, I haven't found the right fit yet, but I think I'm close. And if you want to learn how to look at new jobs or just stay on the market, I recommend that you check out my next video. And thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.